The learning goals for this week include evaluating argumentation writing style, looking at particular types of note-taking strategies for articles, creating a graphic organizer for the topic of reinstating the military draft, and then also students are going to choose a controversial topic for a graphic organizer that they'll create next week. One of the initial challenges faced by many students is the ability to locate and read a variety of articles and then gather appropriate evidence. Not only must students provide facts and opinions in support of their position, they must also be prepared to refute opposing arguments. They must then be able to synthesize this information in order to set up the main ideas of a potential essay. Now, I understand this class is not particularly geared towards intensive writing, but being able to analyze and critically think about an argumentative passage is the ability for you to critically think about how a writer is asserting their opinion on a particular controversial topic. So when reading an argumentative passage, you really need to take a look at 4 different components. One is you've got to be able to recognize the author's main idea. What are they trying to sell? Understand the author's main point. Are there multiple points? What's the main argument to support the point of view by the author? Further, you've got to look for supporting ideas. These are usually the details that include quotes, anecdotes, details, examples, or statistics. In these particular details, they're going to appeal to either reason or emotion. And when I say by either reason or emotion, you have to think about the particular controversial topic. When you're looking at and talking about school shootings, many writers will appeal to emotion. They'll write stories about these horrible incidents that have happened, and they write very emotionally. However, when you're trying to appeal to an audience in regard to a controversial topic about data management, you're likely going to use statistics as well as quotes or examples to be able to describe this information. Last, you've got to know the author's purpose. You've got to look for the actions that the author wants from the reader. In order to write, if you were going to do so, and or analyze an argumentative reading passage, students must be able to research a controversial topic and then take a stand, supported by evidence, that urges readers to share the writer's perspective and insights. Because argumentation is the appeal to reason and follows a formal structure that makes points, supplies evidence, establishes a logical chain of reasoning, and refutes opposing arguments, evaluating this type of reading passage is a bit more sophisticated than probably what you've seen before in high school. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a small reading passage that gives you some background information on the topic of reinstating the draft. Now, when I talk about reinstating the draft, this is a military draft. I'm not quite sure if you remember the military draft that was instituted during the Vietnam War. This is where people who didn't choose to be in the military were told, based off of your age and physical capability, you're going to go to war. There was not much of a decision. You were just told to go or you went to jail. So let's read the reading passage, and what I'll do is I will ask you as soon as it's over for you to make a decision of whether you agree with the proposal to reinstate the military draft or whether you disagree. In January 2003, as the Bush administration prepared for a military strike on Iraq, Representative Charles B. Rangel of New York's Harlem District introduced a bill in Congress that would have reinstated a military draft, in part to bring home to Americans the ramifications of such a military strike, but also to ensure more equitable representation of people making sacrifices. His bill would have applied to men and women aged 18 to 26, with deferments only for high school students and for those physically unable to serve, who would be required to perform community service instead. So if this bill for military draft were to go to Congress, would you support this type of proposal, or would you oppose it? Would you disagree? So I want you to decide, and based off your decision about reinstating the draft, students are going to be instructed to read one of the two articles noted inside a blackboard. If you agree that the reinstating the draft is a good thing, I want you to read the article, A War for Us, Fought by Them. If you disagree with reinstating the draft, I want you to read the article, For Those Who Believe We Need a Draft, by Rankow. As you're reading, I'm wanting you to start taking notes. I want you to be able to identify the author's main reasons. And further, I want you to be able to find and highlight powerful passages or sentences that support those main reasons. So before you do that, before we dive into that, let's take just a brief moment to take a look at some note-taking skills. So first, you need to initiate some pre-reading strategies. Examine the title. Skim the first and last paragraph. And last, I cannot emphasize this enough, is be very cautious when you highlight information. I tell students is that if you highlight a lot, then really you've highlighted nothing. So let's talk about annotation while you read. Annotation is really your own style of taking notes and comments to make connections with what you read. You're basically stopping to analyze and critically evaluate the text based off of what you already know, but just making little comments. So you need to record your thoughts about the text. You might put a question mark. You might say something's interesting or funny. You also might make notes of connections with your own life. You might write out questions if you don't understand something or you find it confusing. Last, I strongly suggest that you identify new vocabulary as you read, so that you can connect this information and its context with further information that you read as you go along. So students need to stop and take a look at the article that's within Blackboard. Obviously, based off of your decision is going to be the article that you're going to read. Now, as you're annotating, you're basically going to see, and as you finish, it will look like the product of the example here for the annotation of text. Yours may not be as colorful, but that's okay. It merely is your own product. I want to be able to see how are you interpreting this information that you're reading, whether you are pro and for reinstating the military draft, or whether you're against the reinstating of the draft. So let's stop, get that taken care of. Students are responsible to submit their note-taking of this article to my email for a grade. The next task related to that particular article is that students are going to complete a graphic organizer, obviously using the article information you just read. So here's an example to help your efforts. So what you need to do is go into Blackboard, open up the graphic organizer, and you'll see 3 columns down, and you'll also see 3 columns across. So obviously, based upon the article that you chose, one of these authors is going to be, for. They're going to be very pro reinstating the draft. They're for it. Now, the other author is going to be anti reinstating the draft. They're going to be against it. So some of your information is going to have more context on probably the left side. One of your pieces of information from the one of the authors is going to be on the right side. You're likely not to find a mix of agreeing and disagreeing all in one article. So don't be upset if everything tends to be down the column of against reinstating the draft. If that's the article that you read, that should be normal. After you've done those pieces, I want you to take the information that you have put in your box for one of the main reasons of why they're either supporting or opposing reinstating the draft, and I want you to be able to very easily synthesize or summarize that information in just a few words. So with the example I gave you here, if I was using the author's Jankow's and their article, which says, for those who believe we need a draft, this particular person gave a reason why they're opposing the draft, because they think the rich and privileged would still find ways to avoid going to war. And I even found a quote that says, even with a draft, people with privilege would be more able to get the medical deferments, or their education would put them disproportionately into non-combat jobs. Really, this author was using the quote that I selected to appeal to a person's emotion. And as I evaluated that particular reason for opposing the military draft, a few words were able to describe what that main idea or main reason was, and that's, who's going to be involved in that military draft. So students need to stop. They need to take their article's information and transfer those reasons and the author as well as the quote they found to support those reasons into this graphic organizer. The last element of this Blackboard lesson piece when outlining argumented reading passages is getting a jump on next week's activity. I want students to choose one of the following controversial topics. Is Walmart good or bad for America? Should gay and lesbian couples be allowed to adopt? Does media violence cause societal violence? Once you decide on a controversial topic, you can't change, because I'm going to email you 2 web articles, one for and one against on your topic, that can relate. So by Monday, students must send me an email with which controversial topic they've chosen. And what I will do is I will send back the for and against on that particular topic, and that will be in relationship to the graphic organizer that will be completed next week. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact me.